Welcome back everyone, and I know it's been a while, but we are just going to jump straight in. I'm just back from watching Lee, so let's look at her trailer.
I was born determined. I was good at drinking, having sex, and taking pictures.
So Lee is a 2024 release directed by Elen Kuras, starring Kate Winslet, Josh O'Connor, Andrea Riseborough, Andy Samberg, Alexander Skarsgard, Marion Cotillard, Naomi Merlon. It's a pretty star-studded cast, to say the least. And it follows the story of photographer Elizabeth Lee Miller, a fashion model who became an acclaimed war correspondent for Vogue magazine during World War II. Now, this is an odd one for where to begin with this film. As I said, I am just back from it. I am still kind of processing. I got to go to an early preview because this does go wide in the UK on the 13th of September. And as you heard, it's a very star-studded film from a director who typically has done a lot of television before. She did things like Inventing Anna, she did Catch-22, which I really liked, and she most recently did Extrapolations as well, which I won't lie, I haven't seen. But I was fairly excited for this. I'm quite a big fan of Kate Winslet. This had gotten quite a bit of buzz about her performance when it had done festivals last year, and it's actually a really interesting story, and also quite an interesting coincidence considering we had Civil War release just earlier this year, and Lee Miller is actually heavily referenced in that film. I myself am a bit of a sucker for these kinds of stories about creatives in these times of great adversity, so yeah, it's safe to say I was pretty excited to see this. And I'm here to tell you it's a little bit of an odd one, and I'll just go into why. Obviously I'm going to remain completely spoiler-free. Now some people might just be like, "Duh, it's a true story, you can't really spoil a true story." I only knew who Lee Miller was. I didn't know exactly what she did, apart from obviously her very famous war photography, but I didn't know much about her actual life and her as a person, so that's why I'm going to remain spoiler-free. So the setup of this film is Lee is sitting down with a journalist in 1977, where he wants her to kind of unearth things about these photographs, tell the stories. The journalist in question is played by Josh O'Connor, someone who I have all the time in the world for at the moment. And despite my love for Josh O'Connor, it did make me a little bit trepidatious, being like, is this going to be a really jump back and forth kind of thing from, I guess, what is the present day in the film to the past? But it's not really, because we do jump straight back in time to 1938, where we meet Lee in France with a bunch of her friends. To kind of fast forward through that, obviously it's 1938 and the war is looming large. She ends up moving to London with a Roland Penrose, who is an artist and eventually did become her husband. And then before we know it, the war has kicked off and Lee is searching for this purpose, and she finds it with Vogue magazine in taking photos surrounding the war, at first in the UK, and then eventually taking her much further afield to France and to Germany. Now, with that kind of setup done, I will focus on Kate Winslet herself, because there was quite a bit of buzz about her performance in this, and I just have to say, I mean, guys, it's Kate Winslet. She's pretty much always going to be good, no matter what she does. But with that also being said, I don't think this is some huge wow Oscar buzzy performance, to be completely honest. It is fairly subdued, it's very believable, it's very emotional when it needs to be, I think. But as I said, it is kind of what we expect from Kate Winslet at this point. She's pretty much always great. Someone who I was really surprised with, and just really surprised to see, because I didn't know he was in this film, was Andy Samberg. People will know him from the Lonely Island fame, SNL as well, and he plays the role of David E. Sherman, who worked for Life magazine at the time, and he kind of becomes Lee's partner as they traverse around war zones. And he's actually really good. He typically has to carry quite a bit of emotional weight in the film, David E. Sherman being Jewish, of course. And honestly, I was pretty impressed with his performance. I really didn't expect to believe him as much as I did. I could go on about other cast members such as Skarsgard and Marion Cotillard, but it is quite just a big ensemble, but the main focus is Lee, and then I guess the secondary character would be Sherman in this. Another kind of star I have to outline, and it only hit me at the end of the film when I realized this, is that the soundtrack is Alexander Desplat. Like, that is a huge name for people that keep up with films and watch them to have a soundtrack done by. And the soundtrack is obviously very good, but here's what I want to come to, where the film felt a bit weird to me. It felt very made for TV. I don't mean for that to retract from the film really in any way. Films for TV can also be very good. But I don't know. As I was watching, I kind of just felt like this is the kind of film I would have gotten home when I was younger, living with my parents, and I'd find like my mum or my dad watching, and it would be like on the History Channel or on Sky or something like that. But it just had this kind of vibe throughout, where I guess it wasn't as dramatic as I thought it would be given the subject matter that it's on. And don't get me wrong, it is also pretty plenty dramatic, but it's a really tough one to describe, this feeling of a TV movie versus something you typically see on the big screen. And that's what kind of made it weirder. Like, I'm looking around, I'm seeing Kate Winslet, I'm seeing Alexander Skarsgard, Andy Samberg, soundtrack by Alexander Desplat, Marion Cotillard's in this as well. And it's obviously fairly expensive, and it's from this director who's typically done more TV than she has done films, and that could be the reason why I guess this feels more like a TV production than a film production. Now, as I said, that doesn't really detract, that's just a weird feeling I had throughout. Because this is, in all honesty, a very well made film, and it tells a good, really important story. But what I ultimately think is it doesn't quite reach the heights that I wanted it to. There is one particularly great moment at the end where, I guess, for lack of a better term, they kind of pull the rug from underneath you, which I thought was really cleverly done. But throughout the film, it is kind of a paint-by-numbers biopic in a sort of way. And some people might say that's a bit unfair. They are depicting what is a true story at the end of the day. But with that being said, I've seen numerous films based on true stories and based on real people and their experiences, and they've had a bit more of an impact than this did. Like, what it really comes down to with this film is it's perfectly fine. It doesn't feel too long. It's very well made. The performances across the board are good. But I feel like for a story as important as this and as impactful as Lee Miller's photographs were, I was expecting something with a little bit more oomph to it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Lee. Please get involved in the comments. Tell me if you've seen Lee, if you want to see Lee. If you have seen it, tell me what you think. Tell me if you enjoyed it. Tell me if you didn't enjoy it. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, share the video if you can. For those of you that are invested in the work I'm doing, I am sorry for going AWOL. I was on holiday and I didn't really get to watch much. I actually did get to watch Blink twice, but didn't have the means to review that whilst I was out there. But now I am in Scotland for the foreseeable future. I believe I'll be seeing Beetlejuice at some point this week. I actually need to rewatch the original because this has been years since I've seen that. I don't think I've seen that since I was about 5 or 6 years old, so I will need to refresh my memory. I was on the Adlib podcast just on the Monday gone, where we had a very fruitful discussion about the Rings of Power Season 2 and what we've seen so far. So you can go back and you can check that out on the Adlib podcast YouTube channel. I will be on the show on Monday where I'll be talking more about Lee, and we'll hopefully be having a discussion of Beetlejuice. But until then, it is good to be back. I'm excited to keep going with these videos, and thank you for watching.